Ambassador, thank you for your time today, and thank you for your hard work on this issue. There was a comment one of my colleagues made earlier about hoping that you would take into account the human and economic impact of decisions regarding tariffs and trade. And sir, I want to thank you for doing just that, recognizing that for a community like mine that lost tens of thousands of textile jobs following the NAFTA trade agreement, that has seen that it for far too long had seen job losses in manufacturing to China and other areas around the world, understanding the impacts of bad trade deals on the human and economic conditions in communities all across this country. I want to thank you for recognizing that and fighting to make sure that the men and women in our communities have opportunities at great careers in manufacturing jobs that are so vitally important to our small towns and our communities. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you for creating the sense of urgency that I know that we all share. I agree with my colleague from Nevada that this should be something that we view as good for America, not a partisan conversation, because every single district across this country is impacted by this trade agreement, and getting this across the finish line sooner rather than later is important. All of the goals that we want as America are advanced, if not all the way, certainly in a meaningful way by advancing this more quickly. So thank you for helping to create the sense of urgency on this, because we would like to get this agreement into consideration as soon as possible. So one of the things one of the areas that I really like in this agreement is the stronger intellectual property protections. And I think that's something that's very positive for this area. And in one particular conversation that we've had many times here is on prescription drug pricing. And one of the things that I'd like for you to address is the fact to talk about how this agreement doesn't create any change to U.S. law. It simply brings the Mexican and Canadian laws in alignment with ours, or closer to where ours are. Could you speak to that for just a minute?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. I would be happy to do that. I'd also like to thank you for your comments about me and my staff, and your point about when we worry about tariffs' effect on someone, we really have to think about the effect of all these people's lives who were destroyed because they lost their jobs. Not because they were told for 100 years they had stupid bosses and they were lazy and they lost all these jobs. And the reality is, in many cases, just like the other side of what Mr. Evans was saying, the reality is a lot of these people are just plain victims of bad economic policy and bad trade policy in the United States. And reversing that by itself is worthwhile. So I just think that's so important. There's a lot more people that have lost their jobs because of unfair activity by China than because of anything to do with tariffs from now until the beginning of the world. So on this issue of data protection and IP protection for pharmaceuticals, I think the crucial thing to remember is what you said, and that is we don't change U.S. law. The Congress changes U.S. law. We're not changing U.S. law. The Congress decided you should have 12 years for biologics, and there's only 8 in this agreement. The Congress set up what the intellectual property protection is in chemical pharmaceuticals as well as in biologics. What we're trying to do and what we were asked to do under the TPA is to get the rest of the world to adopt our standards. That's what we've tried to do. That's all we do. There's nothing in here that in any way is going to have any negative impact on drug prices in the United States.
So, Mr. Ambassador, if we're making one of the big arguments that we're making for better trade agreements with China is the intellectual property theft. If we fail to adopt the USMCA, wouldn't we have concerns about loss of intellectual property under the current agreement or with the lack of protections that we have?
Well, if we don't pass this agreement, all of these plus-ups in digital economy and in intellectual property, and you can go agriculture, and all of them are all going to disappear. People tend to focus on the issue of biologics and data protection, but there also are a whole lot of other things. There's an extension of the copyright term. There's full national treatment. for copyright and related kinds of issues. There's a 15-year protection for industrial designs. There's a lot of, there's criminal and civil penalties for camcording, for stealing these are a lot of real serious issues that are out here that are also addressed, all of which will disappear.
Thank the gentleman.
Thank you. I yield back,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.